record. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Rohan Alexander. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Toronto. This talk is trying to encourage you to plot your raw data, please. And it's based on a blog post that is available at the link here. The dataset that we're going to use in particular is going to be Toronto homelessness dataset. And I just love this quote from Jessica Holman, who is one of my academic heroes at the moment, who sort of just says that those of us who say that you need to plot your raw data, we can't just say it once, we sort of have to say it regularly, and pretty soon people just think we're graphing extremists. It's not, it's just that this is a really important step to take. So if we want to graph some data, we do need to get some data, and we're going to use Sharla's excellent Open Data Toronto R package. I think that most of us are probably familiar with that, but if you're not familiar, you can go over to Sharla's website and just have a look at their package. Basically, it's a wrapper around the Open Data Toronto, around the City of Toronto's data portal. So we can get some data, and we're going to get some data on homelessness here. And we've got a variety of columns that we get. The four that I'd like you to focus on are occupancy date, and this is going to be important in a moment. Sector, so in Toronto, shelters for homeless folks are classified as to whether they focus on men, women, families. There's 4 or 5 different sectors. The occupancy, so every night at 3 to 4 a.m. they walk around and they see how many beds are occupied, and so that's our occupancy number, so we're expecting that to be an integer. And then capacity, which is the number of beds. Now, of course, this has all changed since COVID, with various things. Restrictions have been put in place, but I'm going to focus on earlier data, so we're not going to be affected by that. Okay. This is the Jessica slide. Please plot your raw data. So I said we're going to focus on some dates, and so let's just have a look at the dates to start with. This is what it looks like, and so just looking at that top left one, we get 2017-09-01, and then T and some other debris. So it's not clear just by looking at this as to whether this is year, month, day, or year, day, month. We're pretty confident that it starts with a year, but beyond that, we're not quite sure. And so what we might do is we might firstly get rid of everything that from that T onwards. So we can search for that, and we can remove that. And then we can divide this string into 3 different bits. So and this is going to be based on the dash. So you would have a year, we'll have something that we think might be a month, and then something that we think might be a day. And if we do that and we plot some summary statistics, some counts, beg your pardon, then we can see that we're fairly sure that it's actually year, month, day, because otherwise we would expect in that month column, so this is in that middle, this is in the middle most column, we would expect to have some sort of weird things going on, greater than 12, which of course would suggest that it's not a month. So it seems as though they're year, month, day. Okay, the Jessica Holman slide, please plot your raw data. Okay, so we're going along, we've got our data now, so we're going to try and do some deep learning. Rohan's the professor, and he forces us to plot the raw data. This is not a real quote from a CS major, but it's what I imagine goes through their head. So let's plot our data. So let's do some deep learning, sorry. Now this is not deep learning, but it's also not right. But just briefly, what we've got here is on the y-axis, we've got an occupancy rate. So I've taken the number of people in the beds each night, divided by the total number of beds we've got, and on the x-axis we've got over time, and so we can see that, well, pretty much Toronto homeless shelters operate pretty much at capacity pretty much all the time. There's some differences based on the type, so that type is that sector that I was talking to you about earlier. All right, obligatory Jessica Holman slide. Please plot your raw data. Okay, so now the CS major, he survived his first, or they've survived their first paper, but I did fail in his first paper, and so he's like, okay, this time I'm going to plot that raw data. prepare yourself, folks. If you plot the raw data, the data are a mess. So on the x-axis, what I've done is I've just plotted the row number. Okay, so this data was from a data set, a database. So the first row is going to have a row number 1, and so that's what's on the x-axis. On the y-axis is date. So if the data were in order of their date, based on what our thing was, beg your pardon, based on what our guess was, then we would expect basically everything would sit along that horizontal, along that 45-degree diagonal sort of line. Okay. Now we can see we've got some weird stuff going on at the start, but in the second half it looks okay. Now we can get a little bit of a more clear picture of what's going on by putting the date on the x-axis and then our occupancy number. So this is, remember, this is the number of people in beds at 4 a.m. Okay, so I've summarized it by all the different shelters. I've counted that, and so we can see immediately that we've got a problem in 2017 for sure. There's some other weird things that are going on, but we're just going to focus on this date issue because it seems really systematic. Okay. So let's focus on 2017 because that was where we saw the biggest issue, and we're going to facet here by month. And we can sort of see, if you look at the left graph, you can sort of see immediately what the issue is. So on the x-axis, I've put the day of the month. Okay, so if it's February, then we're going to have 28 up to 28. If so the maximum is going to be 31. And on the y-axis, we've got occupancy number, and we can see that we've got some weird results for the first 12 days of the month. So let's now focus on the right panel, the right graph. So this just focuses on January. So what I've done is I've just zoomed in on January here to really show you what's going on. And so if we had an issue here, we can see that we've not got an issue for the first day. That sort of looks reasonable, but very clearly we've got an issue for the first 12. Let's just zoom back out. Let's just see, do we have some sort of equivalent in the other years? The answer is probably. There's probably something weird going on in 2018, possibly something weird going on in 2019. 2020 looks reasonable. Now, again, I've constructed these to tell my story. Okay, so obviously 2020 is not okay in terms of COVID and things like that, but in terms of the row in the data set, the data do appear reasonable. Okay, so what's the best guess here as to what was happening? My best guess is that for the first 12 days of the month, some of what we guessed were days were actually months. And so if we grab a bit of fancy a few fancy regular expressions, we can actually swap those around. And after we swap them around, we get this graph, and we can see that we no longer have any dates that are on the bottom, that are underneath the horizontal. So beg your pardon, that are underneath the diagonal. There's still some issues, and so the question is, is this good enough? Now, for my purposes, I was doing some modeling of it, and so by and large, I think it was reasonable. But at the same time, you can sort of spend quite a lot of time preparing and cleaning this data. And as the joker tells us, if we're good at something, never do it for free. In the case of the open data portal, the City of Toronto, every data set does have a data owner. And so I sent them an email. Within 6 hours, they actually responded and had said, yeah, we've got an issue here. We thought we had cleaned it. We obviously haven't. But also, look, there's all of these other wonderful data sets that you can use, and we'll update it in the meantime. So happy ending on this story. But the moral of the story, of course, is to please plot your raw data. I'll stop recording and stop sharing and take some questions for 5 minutes.